You're
G'day,
live.
mate. Oh, no. Hello. I mean, yeah, I'm back. Whee!
Welcome home, Mr. Whale. Welcome home.
Honestly, the things I have to do for this business and this industry and for people like you who just keep asking more, never letting me rest. Why won't you let me rest, David?
There was that time, wasn't there, where I said to you, please, Simon, will you go on a great holiday to LA with Pete tonight and a load of megastars?
That is outrageous. It was not a holiday, as you will see from the expenses.
Simon, welcome home. We want to hear all about it. So let's just set the background to this. At the height of a cost of living crisis, a select group of the world's most elite agents decided to get together, and you flew halfway across the world to
see Depeche Mode in Chicago. Yeah.
Well, how was Depeche Mode?
Depeche Mode was, as you would imagine, absolutely spectacular. And I think, have you ever done Chicago? Chicago is such a fantastic city. I had no idea it was like the third largest city over there, actually. And it was just, absolutely loved it. So that was a lovely warm up, because if you're going to do business properly, you want to get yourself in the right zone. So I thought, go there for a few days, get the jet lag out the way and learn how Americans speak and eat.
The closest I've come to Chicago is a very deep pizza. Are they as good as they make them out to be?
All I will say is my friends ordered the personal portion, which sounds a bit odd, at the number one Piquitos, I think it is, which is the number one deep pan pizza in there. I sneered at them for ordering something so ridiculous and went for the small, and I was still eating it in my hotel room at about 2 a.m. in the morning. They're ludicrous. It should be called lasagna on a flan or something like that. Anyway,
lasagna on a flan. You heard it here first, folks. So that wasn't the business side of it, though. After Chicago, you flew to LA. We got a little bit of a snippet of what happened over there. I'll play a couple of the clips just to set the tone.
Right now in LA, Josh Fegan and Peter Knight are plotting a day of blue sky thinking and learning. UK and Australian agents have been targeted, and people I work with and adore may be involved. I'm PropTech legend Simon Whale, and this is going to be the longest day of my life. People call me Forrest Gump.
So
go on. There's the scene set. Tell us how it went.
It was amazing. I mean, Jen, look, the first thing I need to say is, yes, I am extremely lucky, always have been very lucky to have been able to have done, I think this is my third blue sky now, and obviously I am a bit of a conference whore, as you know, but this is a very different kind of, I don't think it's fair to call it a conference per se. It's more like a study group where obviously the idea that I think Peter and Josh are trying to do is to, first of all, get agents together from both Australia and the UK. And I can't stress how brilliant that is to work with some of the very best of the agents, bouncing ideas, learning how they do things. That's worth it in itself. And the people there were just too lovely for words. Then to be able to go to a different place, of course, so when I first was allowed on, Nighty wouldn't allow me on to start off with, no suppliers, as Watkins and the Baldocs would say. But when I proved that I wasn't going to sell, because as you always tell me I can't sell, he let me on, and we went to, first of all, Tokyo, which is obviously batshit mental. We learned all about Kaizen from Toyota, and just absolutely amazing. Then we went to Seattle and we saw the biggest operation building in the world with Boeing and people like that, and spoke to the CEO of Starbucks there, the ex-CEO there. And this time it was going to LA. And you know how sometimes it feels a bit awkward at conferences where you see somebody who's not of the industry, so a sports person or someone for the SES, and at the end of it they always say, and this is now how it relates back to property management.
Yeah.
Well,
come full circle.
Yeah, it's like I don't think you ever always need that, do you? But I definitely think that there was a couple of things, overriding themes that I'm sure was absolutely intentional that Peter and Josh were thinking about this week. And obviously, in the town of I was going to say Vajazzle there, but that's totally wrong. In the town, obviously, of bright lights and everything else there, it was all about that storytelling element. And you don't have to go too far from our very own inimitable Mr. Watkins, who is always, beating people up about just living off the figures if you don't do it in the right way, but telling the story. So whether that was going around the Grammys, whether that was going to, and I'll go through each of them in turn, going to the Paramount Studios, I think it was Cecil B. DeMille, the old director, said the greatest art in the world is the art of storytelling, isn't it? And if we can't, and you agents obviously can't get into telling that story right, then we're all doing something wrong. And that was summarized for me, I think, in the last day session, which was the most engaging. And I'll come on to this in a second when we go through it in turn, but he was the ex-story writer, animator, started off on The Simpsons and became the story writer on the Pixar films. So, I can't say I actually knew his name, but Matthew Lund beforehand. But by the end of it, I realised after watching all the Toy Stories, Pixar here and there, I was actually a groupie of his. And him putting structure around the actual art of storytelling, rather than, as sometimes I think we do when we do it successfully, we probably do it accidentally, rather than understanding the start, the middle, the end, and the story arc, as it were. That was fascinating to see, like a master like him kind of rack that out. So yeah, couldn't have been any more amazing, really. And
you got an opportunity to visit one of the flagship, very glitzy agents out there.
Yeah,
that we may all know from the telly. How was that?
So have you? I mean, genuinely. So, do I watch reality? I don't live in the real world, do I? So I don't actually watch any of these. So, but I thought I couldn't obviously admit that. So I did. I thought what would Mincy do? And I went and watched the series review at the end, just so I could kind of, properly bluff it. And I did that. So there was two of them. They were selling the OC with Jason Oppenheim, the Oppenheim group. Absolutely, just unbelievable. Come on to that second. And then selling Tampa was another one. And I want, as I said, I did, as you know, going on to my webinars, my 2 minutes of research before I come on screen. Didn't do it justice, and I was really determined to go into the Q&A sessions with them. I don't know whether I say not wanting to like them, but let's just say hugely suspicious.
Cynical.
Cynical, Britishly cynical, I suppose. And what was amazing was I came out of there like the guy in the Far Show who changes his mind every 2 minutes. The intensity and the seriousness that they put towards their businesses, you might not get that when you're watching, obviously, the kind of relation reality nonsense that goes on there. But in terms of what they've done it for, it's absolutely fantastic. So let's just go through, if it's all right, if you can indulge me, let's just go that first full day there when I got there. And it went, as I said, selling the OC. It's actually Netflix's longest running individual show overall. So I think they're just about to hit their 6th series. When I watched the first show, and it was like the first listing, the debut listing that they're showing there was 106. It was $106 million or something like that, and the fee, even though it was a commission split, was $3 million for the OC crowd. You're dealing with a different kind of audience, aren't you?
Well, they work on a different level as well, because it's fair to say that the offices are not your average office either.
I was lucky that Joe Swash was there from Moneypenny, obviously, and we all, we just did that visit there the other day, and still always hold them up as the pinnacle. I've always said I've been lucky enough to make it to Google's offices, and Moneypenny are the absolute pinnacle. But for me, seeing the Moneypenny approach put into agency agency land was for me the big one there. And look, I mean, I know those kind of listings are second nature to you in Presswich, David, but It was a bit of a surprise to me coming from South Central West Division.
Well, let's have a quick look at that.
Yeah,
at how things look.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can see.
There's a really cheap fit out then, isn't it?
Funny enough, I didn't get to see the toilets. They wouldn't let me in there for some reason. But
I don't know why that is.
No, it's a mystery. So they stopped short of patting me down to make sure I hadn't shoplifted anything when I went there. But yeah, just amazing to spend sort of over an hour with him. Again, I think you see that reality TV thing, and you think it's all so superficial. But what you don't realise, he was a really, really successful lawyer in his day. He had, and actually, I think he won a case against the Supreme Court as well. So there was, there's a lot going on in terms of Jason and what he's done there.
And do you get that sense that, because looking at that, you could be cynical that it's sort of just it's very glitzy for the sake of it. Nobody needs an office or a workspace to look that rock and roll. Does that translate through to getting the results? Is that part of the sort of secret sauce?
Absolutely spot on there. I mean, that was unsurprisingly, that was what a lot of people wanted to understand there. And he said, look, it obviously has enabled him to do stuff that other people can't do. That ridiculous, it's a brilliant pool table, $40,000. The opening party was $70,000, when they just reoperated. But you have it sprinkled in with all sorts of just wonderful batshit mental LA stuff as well. So Over the Road was where they filmed a scene out of Scarface. So you've always got this reality and distortion effect thing going on there. But yeah, he talks about what he's able to do, that it manages him and his team to keep the fees up high. And again, just to put this into context, I mean, that was a 3% fee because it was a split on that first series. When we were talking to him about specifically about what he does, he's around the 5.5%, 6% mark. As a fee. I mean, just, UK agents' minds will just obviously be popping at that sort of stuff, especially when you consider obviously the value of property over there and everything else. But then there's still the marketing, as the Aussies would call it, the vendor paid advertising on top. So the presentation of the home and everything else might come to $70,000. And he himself, if they didn't want to take it, would actually, he'd fund it himself and essentially take it out of escrow when the property sold at the end, because he knew what was needed to get the right fee for his, for his clients.
And how does it work so he's got a team of very glamorous staff members as well, part of his team.
Most of them ex-partners, and he was actually really, really honest in terms of it's a good job they don't have an HR department.
But he's got all of these beautiful people working for him. What do they get out of it? Are they effectively are they employed? Are they more or less self-employed? Are they taking a big cut of that 6% fee? How does it work?
Yeah, so they will have their own. That would be him literally doing it. Obviously, if I don't know if they would do separate splits, I'm assuming if they work as a team, but that's where he's working. For them, they're still all fully employed by the business. But what they do say, one of the biggest, one of his challenges is retaining the culture as they obviously get into, the endorsements can be 6-7 figures, there. So whether that's feminine hygiene products, as they were talking about, or makeup, whatever it is there, these guys have all created a real following, 1.5 million followers on Instagram and things like that can genuinely be monetized. But of course, trying to get these people to retain the focus then, because that is the enabler for you doing that stuff, still has to be the property and the business itself, doesn't he? So it's very clear he never loses sight of that. Maybe some of the people do, but they're not there for very long, if not. So I do think that was really, I mean, some of the great sayings that they were coming out with, not when they were there, just from the show, the little bits I saw. The guy who jumps on, who described himself as the alpha dog, the big dog, he says, on a rating of 1 to 10, I'm a 15. Now, not since the days of Simon Whale and PropTech have we heard bullshit like this. He says, I stayed true to my roots, so I drive an orange Porsche because I'm from Orange County. Got you. One of the few fellas there as well is, I've dated guys, I've dated girls. all I know is they're both batshit mental. And then one which shows maybe that these aren't, that they are very focused. One asked the question, was Abraham Lincoln the first president? So those were some of the comments that jumped out for me in terms of the clientele.
When you're looking at these businesses and you look at the sort of figures that they're doing and the absolutely fabulous properties they're selling, I would go so far as to say those are not everyday homes for everyday people. No. So you're pitching to a distinct audience, which I think the closest we come to it is that sort of fine and country end of the market here, if you like, or Tyrone Ash, if I dare to say. But at that level, are they doing anything that is distinctly different to what UK agents are doing? So for argument's sake, do they have a reliance? They've got Zillow over there, I think, haven't they? That's their kind of right move. Is that where they're going to market? Is it Instagram and personal connections? Are they more old school in that effect?
Certainly the personal brand is, and he admits obviously that's a difficulty, and they've all admitted that, the best ones try to still promote the individual brand. I mean, you and Megan stood up on stage, didn't you, when you were talking about the Women in the Estate Agency, and how do you do that? It can sometimes be quite difficult. I think these guys have just cracked it. They know how to do it. They are confident enough that if somebody does feel too big for the brand and they go on, there's 1,000,001 hungrier people to come behind. So I think there is some unique stuff. Obviously, they do, they make the point, loads of their clients don't want to have any TV attention at all themselves. But what they do appreciate is that they have a USP secret sauce by tapping into these, these ultra high buyers, net worth buyers. But the other thing is, as well as David, it isn't all those 100 and, those are the ones that genuinely get the attention. But, many of the guys do start off and, work on $1 million listings. Now, you can imagine a $1 million listing in LA is not going to be, anything too salubrious, is it? Jason himself made the point that he for the first 2 years, he made $50,000. So he's put in the hard, even though his family had been in real estate for many, many, many decades and everything else. So they, yes, I think you can be classically, as we say, Britishly cynical about everything there. But these guys have absolutely made it happen and just understood that niche of the market just so fantastically well. One final comment on it as well. He was flying over, as you do for the weekend, over to Manchester to watch the City game and then off to Paris. And I was like, if you need me to show you the Trafford Centre, I can show you all the highlights. You can imagine taking him in for a steak bake.
We've had a question sent in by an anonymous watcher. Just watching Kerfuffle Live, out of interest, those offices and organisations, what's the size of their operational reach compared to a London, Birmingham, or large town? Is it extremely focused, or are they free to roam?
I think they are. Look, I'd be guessing here because, again, I didn't hear it specifically from them, but I have heard it, in more detail. What I think you find is the reach of the actual brokerages are quite large. They will. So the lady from Selling Tampa, for example, will do the whole of Tampa. But what you find is the individual brokers become the experts, obviously, in their niche patches. So again, the Aussies would call it a farm area, and they have to, just like anybody, you have to be the master of your own domain in that area, don't you? So I think that would be how that would work. But no doubt at all, the digital footprint goes far and wide. And look, the other thing is as well is when they're talking about massive success, and it stands to reason, you might only do a handful in the first year, 18 months or something like that. But even when you're up to full speed and you're doing you're only still needing to do 5, 10 listings at those kind of fees, aren't you? So you are really picking and choosing and getting the right ones. At that ultra top end, it's literally about stopping people coming across the, to the open house as much as anything, who want to just ogle it. They want to make sure they're dealing only with the super serious buyers and everything else. So hopefully that kind of answers that.
Because they do get people like you that turn up just for the buffet at an open house.
In Australia, I would. Obviously, I'd go to every open, every auction and every open house I could. I think one of the Aussies that you actually know him, mate. Peter Clark, who we interviewed.
A really lovely guy. Not in your face, sort of too loud. He's quite reserved, but he's a great guy.
He was brilliant. He was saying, he at your point, which I think was where you were going with earlier, he's since joined O'Brien. Obviously, he had his own very successful. He's been great to catch up with him, and we need to do separately because he's opened a whole shed load of offices in the last 18 months there. But the separate thing, he asked the lady from selling Tampa, actually, who was there was another one, Meg, who actually does all the selection actually of the reality shows ones there, and said, look, would this work in and he wasn't talking specifically. He says, is it just the property, is it the people, is it a combination, or can you go and sell a load of shitty property and still have that same thing? And of course, I think no one most of it is still about personality and the people, but having those kind of properties you have there, of course, is always going to have the property porn element to it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Rather than just a Barbie. No, that's being unkind to my Aussie brethren.
So talking of porn elements, you were in the big city of lights and cameras and action. You got to tour around. Was it Paramount Studios you went to?
So the next one, actually, that afternoon we went to the Grammy Studios, and I didn't really know what to admit there. And to see they did a 60-minute music production workshop. So to see Josh Fegan mixing tunes was one of the more surreal moments there. And I think we've actually got a Blue Sky album there. But that was. What would you take from that again? I suppose, obviously, the whole presentation about the Grammys and everything else there, but the musical, the musician, whatever, who was showing you the process of sampling and everything else there, and how you can focus using the technology these days on being so niche and targeted in a way that you couldn't even plan, have hoped to have been just last year, is a game changer. And of course, just like every conversation coming up at the moment, how AI, ChatGPT is just going to transform that world, and they're having to get their head around it. And, is it on balance a good thing or a good thing or a bad thing? And they haven't they haven't balanced that out in their own minds. I think that's just interesting to see that every industry, we get caught up in our own, don't they? But this is a tidal wave hitting everyone, and some will get washed away, and some will obviously ride on the crest of that wave and take an advantage. And I think, if anything, that's what Peter, in particular, Peter Knight, was trying to get across. Is look, the days of wondering when it's going to happen, we're way past that. So you either get quick and you understand where you're going, and look to the end game. Look to the 3 to 5 year end point, and almost track back to figure out what do you need to do to get to that place. I think is some of the best advice you can see out there.
We should create an EA GPT. Already on it, right?
I don't know who that is. Whoever it is, I've already registered Chat Bollocks, so we've got that in the prop tech world already. So that's already done. Obviously, to go around all of the Grammy stuff, literally, to see Michael Jackson's glove and everything else, and Shakira's golden crown, and of course, I've got my own, albeit with a few more roots. That was a beautiful experience. But then day two, obviously, we won't talk about what happened that night, but I obviously let myself down as usual. Was the VIP tour around Paramount, and that was, that really is something special there. Just the whole scale of it, the specialization that goes on. We managed to talk to people, and it almost sounds dull. People that creating who do the lights on all these presentations, and then do the signs that are created, literally just for either promoting it or signs within the shows themselves. The absolute passion that these guys spoke about, and then what goes into making either a TV show or a film itself. You just that thing about, you can understand why it's America, and largely to a degree now what the Arabs are doing quite well in terms of scale and can-do attitude. We went around one set that was literally just being built for the show, and I just asked the question, how many people apart from the actors, and it's a really small one, you imagine something like Cheers, this would be a much smaller kind of version of that. I said, so how many people will there be with all the kind of support elements there? And how many would you guess? I mean, just on a normal show, how many people would you imagine?
I mean, it's got to be huge. You've got to have a minimum of 100 people supporting each 1,000, show, right?
1,000.
Wow.
So I was with you. I was imagining, a few dozen art people, light people running around, and they made the point between 500 and 1,000 just for an absolutely, and I want to say bog standard kind of production there, and that then just that blows your mind, doesn't it? And every one of those is kind of specializing to the degree they are, and everything else.
So what's the message then if you were to extrapolate that back into our industry and probably a less glamorous setting like Prestwich?
For me, not so much. I don't know what you can get for the scale there, because we haven't got the readies to fund it. But I think the specialization point for me is, I've always been a fan of that. If you're going to do prospecting, have someone dedicated to prospecting, client services, property management. The more you can break that down, and I appreciate you have to get to a certain scale before you can do that. People doing the same job more often get better at it and deliver better results. So I think that would be and become genuinely.
Did you see any sort of tech out there that turned your head in terms of prop tech? Are they very heavily tech reliant, or?
So I think that's really interesting. So they did mention one of the CRMs that are over there, but the difficulty, and I've experienced this in the States before, is because they're obviously they've got some big brokerages. I mean, we've got ones like Keller over there, but because they're largely again individual people, their tools of the trade are your buffers, your Facebooks, your HubSpots, and just more, much more generic marketing tools than you would ordinarily expect. So yes, they have their MLS systems for sharing the properties. They obviously do have estate agency CRM ones there. But I think what we were looking at there, and this is always the case, isn't it, for the boutique end, is they're largely businesses that are not as tech specific, because they focus so much more on the human elements there. Now, I didn't ask the question, and I'm sure they have. I mean, certainly looking at the Selling Tampa, Sharelle, who was there, she has just somebody who literally handles all of her social media and everything else. So where she started off with a few thousand, she's now got 150,000 followers, just on one of the platforms alone. So a full-time person just looking after it and everything else. Now, what I would say, and I'm not going to say that it certainly wasn't her, she's really, 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 really good in terms of sharing. She was really kind on Instagram and said, I've just met these lovely people there, and Simon Well. But the other people that we were talking to here, the monetization, and this probably shouldn't surprise you coming from. So literally, if you want to have retweets, if you want to have an Instagram here, there is a fee there. I couldn't get my head around at I think it was Paramount. It was Paramount. Was that sign guy? I just assumed you would be able to. Let's say you're showing a kitchen shot, and you were going to show, Heinz baked beans or Heinz ketchup, whatever else is there. Unless there's two elements here. First of all, you're missing out on the endorsement point, product placement. So they would have a conversation there to see if it was. But there's also a point there about if you negatively associated with it. Somebody famously, I think, had the guys were telling me, had a heart attack on a Peloton. And you can imagine that, and literally the share price dropped the day afterwards. They hadn't got that. They hadn't got the approval to use Peloton. And of course, so there's this whole commercial thing that sits behind just trying to put on a TV show, you know, because I think they've become, I don't know if you remember going back to the old Bond film, that it was like every other scene, he used to have like his Sony Vaio out and they'd clearly paid them about. It seems to become a lot more subtle, but maybe that's just because I'm not noticing this stuff. But just that element in terms of understanding every bit of what you're, you know, what you are worth. What if you're going to enter into this capitalist society we are, that's how you do it properly and monetize it.
Fascinating.
And that was it really. Then the last two I'll just go through. Selling Tampa, as I said, this was where Peter and Josh they interviewed Sherelle, and she's a fascinating character, and I'll certainly write a bit more of her later on a blog. So she'd been in the military, and not just the military, she'd been in a paratrooper. So she was saying her back was done. She'd been in Afghanistan and everything else. Done her time and everything else, and had earned a little bit of money when just getting a realtor's license there. And then she realised with her first check, she'd earned about sort of $8,000 or something, which was going to bootstrap her business and wanted to take it seriously. At 49, I still don't know what I want to do. People like that, the vision that she had, she knew straight away that not only did the sort of agency that she wanted to have, where she only employs women, which I think is a really interesting, from the positive discrimination point of view. I think I've got this right, and someone will correct me if not. She only employs women of colour as well. So, I can only imagine the rage from some people coming over here. And what are the rights and wrongs of that? I don't know. I'm still too jet lagged to do it. But having that vision that's what how you're going to differentiate your business, knowing who you can get the most out of. And also, she knew from day one that she wanted to have have a reality TV show backing her from the get-go. So she was playing them all off against each other before she finally got Netflix to give her there. And if you do watch it, as I said, watching Selling Tampa, you can see how she has used that just so fantastically well to their advantage again.
And imagine doing the actual Netflix thing is an earner in its own right.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's not much. Certainly, what everything says is, in the first series, you might get a few $1,000 or whatever an episode there, but then it can go up, $10,000 more. And as I said, it's all about the endorsements on that point. So I naively thought that actually Netflix might kind of not pay them anything because they might sell it. Well, it's going to give you tremendous marketing. It's going to give you the ability to do that. But they still do get that revenue once you've been picked up in other series. So, I don't want to say. I think you're going to be coining it in from all angles, really, if you do it correctly. And what was wonderful as well, she was, probably coming from the military, you'd expect this. She was hugely humble. And I don't know if you've had the chance to work with anyone but those people, I've worked with a few over the years. They're so
as you know, Simon, I very rarely get to work with anybody humble.
Or professional, yeah.
Or professional, yeah.
Yeah, but she did. That was the question I asked her, and what was the most she took out of it? And certainly, the ability to process and strategize was obviously quite big there. And Meg was the lady she was the casting director, as I said, from Netflix, and she said she'd almost got this like sixth sense now, this radar as to whether somebody was going to be good for Is
that why she walked across the other side of the room every time you walked in?
Every time I literally said I will do anything to appear on the telly, Alan. And as usual, I hit the note. I knocked it out of the park. I used Alan Partridge in my frame of reference, which, of course, she wouldn't have a Scooby-Doo about. But yes, that was really interesting. And, asking how important is it for her as a casting director to like somebody? If they put in, she said, not at all.
Well, they're not necessarily looking for likable characters, are they? They're looking for because it's either extreme that'll do. You either have to be really likable or people hate you. Yeah. There's no vanilla, is there? Really?
No, there isn't. And I think that's there's something you need to have. You can't just have everyone being batshit mental. There's got to be the glue that keeps it together. Going back to the whole kerfuffle and you. Special ingredient there, but it was really, really good just to see how they You know, those people again who are trying too hard to get on it, and those people that would change. Obviously, you know, they started off as one thing and they became another. I think anyone who remembers Big Brother and Nasty Nick will obviously recall how that can go fantastically, either brilliant or badly. So yeah, they're just really, really good to see how that works. And I think, you know, so Tampa obviously isn't something like, you know, another. You might, I mean, me not knowing much about it, but apparently it's a big area. You know, even Tom Cruise has a place there. So you still see those properties, and of course they have something. As you said, probably apart from Fine and Country, New Savills and United Franks aren't going to be able to have. But I think, again, coming back to wind it all back up again, it's the story that's the important. And that was the kind of final wind-up. And as I said, look, I've steered away from what Josh and Peter are going to do largely, because I think they're going to be obviously highlighting this at EA Masters later on the year. But the last full one was that Matthew Lunn. And as I said, like me, you probably wouldn't have known the name, but he was an animator on The Simpsons, went on to do Pixar storytelling there. And he talked us through. You've seen the film Up, haven't you? You've seen the film Up with the little...
Yeah, sure, with the balloon and the house and the old man.
He talks through the first 10 minutes of that film, which for memory doesn't have any talking in it. And he talks the arc that you're trying to go through. This is a young couple that meet, fall in love. It's, you know, they keep talking, highlighting that they want to have a baby. She then, and you know, obviously she grows older, she falls, she ends up in hospital, she dies, and they don't manage to go on the holiday.
Spoiler alert! Don't tell them she dies.
Yes. So, but the way they plot that, and he talks about the release of the dopamine up here, you know, get big the release there. He says where people fall is trying to maintain that, you know, sort of, and you just tend to zone out. Whereas if you bring it back down, and he's talking about the whole biological aspect of this, and you know the whole element, and I'll post it out on there. His book, Matthew Lunn's book about storytelling. I read it all the way back on the plane. Is just fantastic, and there isn't a business out there, if you have customers, that shouldn't read it. It's absolutely fantastic, just in terms of talking about every story based over, you know, the tens of thousands of years that we've been telling stories for, has the same, you know, traditional arc. Who's the hero? What's the challenge? How do you solve the issue and everything else? And if you can, rather than do it accidentally, as many of us do, you know, on a good day we do it well, on a bad day we kind of miss the points, or we don't get that variance in there. He gives you that, and I just think it's for me, it would be my top tip of the week would be just to read that and try and see how that applies in your own business, in your own day-to-day work.
Wow. Did you get any duty-free?
I didn't know, because you know me, not a big drinker, don't smoke. So what is there? Oh, the hotel was opposite a cannabis dispensary, but as you know, I hate all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, no, you're a proper teetotaler. You're well known for that. Very well known. Mr. Whale, so whilst you were out in the sunset, we've been looking at what's been going on. Sorry?
What's been happening?
What's been happening? Back here in cold, windy, grey, wet, blighty. Something remarkable has happened in the last week. The government want to introduce some more changes to the private rented sector, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Which involves introducing planning permission for what they call short-term lets. And this is, they're doing it off the platform of those sort of very heavily tourist hit areas where locals don't get to buy properties. But they've sort of missed the point by trying to introduce planning permission. And what's really strange about this is that I was looking out in the press for sort of various different commentary about it, because it really is a pernicious threat to the industry. And yet not many people were very vocal about it. There's a consultation, so everybody's got a chance to sort of have their say, and I encourage everybody to do so. But I can't even believe I'm going to say this, but the one person that seemed to come out and sum it up precisely was Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Whoa.
I know, right? Whoa.
Hang on.
So,
this is like Planet of the Apes when I come back years later and everything's changed, and it's you maniacs.
This is superb. So this is courtesy of David Votter. He reposted Rees-Mogg giving his couple of minutes worth on this, and I think it's just worth having a look at. Here you go.
There's been a government announcement today that's going to make it more difficult for people to let out their homes for short periods. If you want to, you will have to get planning permission. You'll have to pay potentially £452 to get this permission, just to allow people to use your house for a few days if it's not your primary residence. There may be some exemption for your primary residence. But this is another regulation hitting people in the use of their own property. Why shouldn't you be allowed to let your property out to whomsoever you wish to let it out to freely? Why has the government got to interfere and create cost and regulation for people who aren't doing any harm? They're just allowing somebody else to live in their house. It doesn't change the fact that the house is being lived in by somebody. But this is symptomatic of a whole approach that has been wrong over several years and has pilloried the private landlord. Now, the private landlord is really important, both economically and in terms of housing provision. What does the private landlord do? He provides flexibility. So if you want a mobile labour force, you need the private landlord so that people can move, can go to where the jobs are, in Norman Tebbutt's famous phrase, that they will be able to move around the country to get employment. It provides flexibility because it can be short-term or long-term. And most private landlords are good and sensible people who, when they've got a good tenant, don't want to get rid of that tenant for frivolous reasons. They want that tenant to stay, providing an income. So it's good for both sides. And what has been happening recently has just stacked it against the private landlord, which will reduce supply and put up costs. So first of all, it's harder to offset interest liabilities against rent. What does that do? It pushes up rents, it makes letting properties more difficult and more expensive for the tenant. Likewise, getting rid of Section 21, this is one of these airy-fairy, lefty things that has the wrong consequence, the law of unintended consequence. What does it in fact do? It reduces supply. What happens if you reduce supply? Prices rise and you reduce flexibility. Landlords and tenants actually have an interest in flexibility in the market. Look how little private renting there was in the 1980s before it was freed up by Margaret Thatcher. If we take away things like Section 21, then there will be less supply. It will be harder for tenants. And I will declare an interest. I do have a property or two that I let out myself.
I think we've had enough of that. I do have a property or two. But what he says is absolutely correct in terms of these death by 1,000 cuts, introducing various bits of change to and meddling. This whole, I mean, first of all, I think I've told you this before. I don't understand what levelling up actually means.
It doesn't.
It's just another excuse for meddling in a system that is already struggling to cope with demand. It's struggling to cope with housing supply, and it's just staggering that we don't have enough power to fight back as an industry. It's just it's something that really, really bothers me.
It is, and everything he said there was obviously, and just to prove you can say the right thing, and even when you're as despicable as him. A quick Google, of course, does highlight that he owns Gournay Court, which has taken loads of additional funding, and at last count had 57 bedrooms when it was post-war. So he's clearly thinking a little bit more closer to home, literally, about what it can do for him. But no, I think it's. I don't know. You feel like everyone needs to get together because they famously again ignored us again, didn't they, during the budget? Nothing ever seems to move forward in terms of the importance or relevance that this industry deserves, and it's like, what's going to make it happen? I can't think of any issue other than housing that is so. It's one of our basic human rights. If I told you I was going to take away
education for children, you'd be horrified. But
I think
it's important that everybody's got a roof over their heads and a stable environment.
But let me take it back to LA as well. So one of the things that Jason mentioned, which everybody, even the Aussies, jumped up, was he said the Americans, it's one of the most respected job choices over there, being a realtor, being an estate agent there. It's like, I'm pretty certain that's not how it's, every survey I've ever seen is, and that's just classic, isn't it? In terms of it's deemed as important. Well, let's make it totally political. It's deemed as important as the nurses and the doctors, but not enough to actually do anything serious about. We'll clap them. You guys obviously went straight back in the front lines, didn't you? Post lockdown, and obviously generated all of that stamp duty revenue for them. But when it comes out the other side, instantly forgotten.
It's shocking. It's shocking, and I only hope that
you need to get militant, mate. You need to start.
Well, listen. I look at. We've mentioned this before, but Votta was the one that reposted Jacob Rees-Mogg, and I take it that Votta and Co working hard at Property Mark are not just flying around the country doing lots and lots of conferences, but they are also bringing this to the door of the people in government that are going to sit up and pay attention, or find some sort of pressure point that you can squeeze so that you get their attention. I think
you've got to love a lot of Votta, haven't you? Ultimately, I mean, there's the first thing. So,
well, it'll certainly be the best looking thing we've had in Parliament for a while if he makes it there. But I think it's hugely important, and I'm encouraging everybody to get involved with giving their thoughts and response to that consultation, because I think it really is something that affects all of us. It's livelihood, but it's also, like I said, it's just a basic human right: clean, affordable accommodation for all.
That's absolutely right there. Yeah,
How lefty was that?
That was great. Soapbox material there. And talking about, could you just whack that up one more time? I'll give it a quick shout out. Yeah, please. Anyone remember? We know we obviously big fans, big supporters of Do It for Dom, for our friend Dom Subiani, tragically hit by Huntington's disease from FBM Estate Agency there on the 25th of May. Only just over a month off, over 100 attending, and I mean, it is the absolute cream of the crop of the industry. It's going to be a fantastic day. Some people are, I think, a little bit worried about how difficult it is. I'm doing it. I'm not doing any exercise. It's meant to be dead. I won't say dead simple, because it's still a few hours, but it's certainly not. Certainly not a mountain climb or anything like Snowdon was when I almost fell off the side of it. We'd love to obviously talk to anyone who's got any ideas for sponsorship, or so any of the prop techs out there want to get in contact, and indeed obviously agencies. And if you've got auction prizes, I think last time some lunatics paid $2,000 to shave my head, which I probably could do without. I could probably do with paying myself at the moment. So if you do want to do it, obviously go message either Graham at doitfordom.co.uk or Susanna at doitfordom.co.uk. I think she's the admin girl there, isn't she?
Oh, you are gonna get it later for calling her that. Apologies to Susanna, who of course is the driving force behind Do It for Dom. A great industry.
Shit, that's me. I'm the muse.
What's going on in Kerfuffle world this week? What have you got planned?
Back to a tough week, Lindsay. I've got the Agents Giving Golf Day on Thursday, so I've got that. Do you know what? I don't know. You know this better than me, because you've been shouting emails at me, expecting me to do.
We'll catch up in the morning. Let's say goodbye to everybody, Simon.
Let's do this. Everyone have a lovely, lovely Sunday.
Enjoy, guys. See you.